Hello. Last time we shared on the series that I've entitled She Rises, we spoke about the Judaism and the implications it had towards women. And if you missed it, I really would love for you to go back. It's the one prior to this one. I would love for you to go back and listen to it because I believe that it really brings such light and clarity to the Gospels, to the scriptures in the New Testament, the backdrop of seeing that the time frame that Jesus came to earth in his ministry was right on the tail of the silent 400 years and in the time frame of Judaism. And so today I want to share another story that I've been contemplating since last time, a story we've all heard about the Samaritan woman. But I believe that the Lord is just, even as I was preparing to share, has given me some new insight that really tickled me. So I wanna share that with you today. The story of the Samaritan woman is found in the 4th chapter of John. And Jesus has purposely gone out of his way with his disciples to Samaria. And he sent the disciples off to go get food, and he has stayed at Jacob's well. It's high noon, and a Samaritan woman comes to the well, and he asks her if she would draw him some water. Well, she's absolutely flabbergasted because, as we talked last time, she's a woman, and Jews don't talk to women in public. And Jews surely don't talk to Samaritan women in public. The Samaritans were referred to by the Jews as dogs, half-breeds. And the reason being, when the Israelites were held in captivity by Assyria, God had given in his original laws and commands that the children of Israel were not to intermarry with other nations, heathen nations, because God knew that it would draw their hearts away from him into worshiping other gods. So for their best interest, he commanded them not to intermarry with heathen nations. Well, Assyria was heathen. So those who did intermarry were looked down and frowned upon and completely ostracized from the Samaritans. So for Jesus, who was a Jew, to not only speak to a woman, but to speak to a Samaritan woman, she was not quite sure what was going on. And she's like, why would you ask me to draw you water? And he makes the comment to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. The Jews believed when a woman was pregnant, they didn't use the term pregnant. My mother's generation called it in the family way. But they didn't use the word pregnancy. They used the word living waters. She is with living water because she had living life on the inside of her womb, which was full of water. I may be wrong, but I believe the Samaritan woman was not only obviously a woman and obviously a Samaritan woman, but I believe that she was also barren. There is no evidence in the scripture that she had children. Husbands, ex-husbands, yes, but not children. Can you imagine, with the backdrop of Judaism and the role of a woman in that culture, that day at high noon at the well? She was already the least of these because she was a woman. She was the least of the least because she was a Samaritan woman. Was she the least of the least because she was a barren Samaritan woman? And Jesus went out of his way for a divine appointment with this this woman. And they begin to have conversation. And she finally says, "Sir, give me this water." And he says, "Go bring me your husband." She says, "I don't have a husband." And he says, "You're right. The fact is, you've had 5. And the man you're with now is not your husband." I have heard this taught numerous times. And it was always perceived that she was not such a nice woman. Prostitute, possibly. Definitely easy, right? I mean, she had 5 husbands, and she's living with someone that's not her husband. I don't think that's the case. And if it were, Jesus would never have come to shame her or condemn her, because that's not who he is. I suppose, with the backdrop of Judaism that we learned last week, where a man is entitled to divorce his wife for any reason, especially for barrenness, I suspect that Jesus was saying, "I see you. I see what's happened to you." A woman could not divorce a man, yet she could be discarded as a second-rate citizen, equivalent to that of a slave, very easily set aside. And she had no recourse. Remember, she couldn't even go to court because she was inherently known as a liar. So could we suppose that she's been discarded and rejected 5 times and set aside, and now the man she's living with maybe won't even marry her? In the Jewish culture, having that firstborn son to carry the name and the seed and the legacy was the best of the best. So a barren woman had to carry so much shame and so much condemnation. No wonder she was at the well hours after the other women had come and gone. I don't believe for a second that Jesus came to remind her of her sin and her shame, because the word says he didn't come to condemn, but to save. I think that day at the well, he reached in and he saved her. In their conversation, she says, "Well, one day the Messiah is coming, and he'll answer all our questions." And he looks at her and he says, "I am the Messiah." Think about that. A divorced 5 times, divorced and set aside to fend for herself. And now the man she's with won't even give her his name. Ostracized from her community, gathering water at the heat of the day when no one's there. And the Messiah looks to her, and the first time the words were ever spoken that "I am he" were spoken to her. Isn't that just like him? It's just like him. To find the lowliest of the lows and to give them an audience with a king. To be the very first. To be seen and heard and loved. The disciples come up. She's so enamored. It's sinking in. He's a Messiah. He knows everything about me, right? She leaves her water jug and she runs back to the village to tell all the men and women in the village that I've met a man. He told me everything. He sees me. He knows me. He loves me. He's inviting me in to the secret that he's the Messiah. Do you realize she, the Samaritan barren woman, was the first evangelist ever? He entrusted the most precious gift and message to a woman who was so broken. Oh my goodness. How can you not celebrate a God like that? What kind of God is he? What kind of God is he? He found me in my brokenness, my barrenness. And he let me know that he was the Messiah, the one my heart had longed and hoped for, even though I didn't know it. I pray wherever you are today, that you too, in your barrenness, in your isolation, in your shame and your condemnation, that you would ask him for living waters and let him come in and wash away all that's not of him. Until we meet on the other side of the screen. Shalom.